What if USQ and MLQ overlapped and had the same schedule operating at the same time? In this video, we're going to talk all about it. Welcome to Snapshot, your place for all news, history, and just chatting about quad ball. My name is Jackson, and in this video, I want to talk about what if MLQ and USQ had the same schedule, both operating from September to April. How would the leagues change? How would the structure change? Schedules, teams, players. We're going to talk about all of that and more in today's video. All right, here we go. Here is the map of the current MLQ landscape. We'll be referring to this map and some other slides and stuff that I've got posted, but this is my idea for a combined USQ MLQ schedule. So starting with the current MLQ landscape, 15 teams currently exist in MLQ. I don't think a combined landscape could exist with all of these teams. Now, which teams could support a franchise and which ones couldn't, that's a little harder. Because you need a lot of infrastructure. You want to make sure you have enough college and club teams in the area to support basically a whole extra team that's going to be put into the area. So I would say that these 4 teams would not stay. And it's really just the 4 teams that weren't represented at MLQ Champs. So the Austin Outlaws, New Orleans Curse, Toronto Raiders, and Ottawa Black Bears, I'm taking out from this concept. So we're going to be left with 11 teams: Houston, San Antonio, Kansas City, Minneapolis, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Charlotte, Washington, New York, and Boston. And we'll just move forward with these 11 teams. This can obviously change, but we're going to move forward with these. So with these teams, in order to have an extra team that's playing alongside other USQ teams, you've got to make sure that you're able to pull from college and club teams to create a whole third team, because we've essentially created 3 tiers. We've got our professional tier, which is your MLQ teams. You've got your club tier, which is still competitive, still good teams for players that aren't in college anymore, that either aren't good enough for professional or don't want to go professional. And then, of course, your collegiate scene, where it all starts. So for most of these places, it'd be great to have 2 college teams, a club team, and then your professional team, and kind of funnel up through the ranks. Some of these are only going to have 1, like Sam Houston for the Texas Copperheads, and that would feed into the Houston Legends. UTSA and Texas State, and even UT to a lesser extent, although they'd be closer to Austin if they ever came back, would feed into Heat and feed into San Antonio. And you can look at all of these, but all of them will have 1, 2, even sometimes 3 colleges, or in the case of Boston and New York, a lot more. Detroit's an interesting case because there's not an active club team in Michigan, to my knowledge. There's the Ohio Apollos, but I've got them listed under Cleveland. But Michigan State, Michigan, and Pittsburgh should be, in theory, enough to support a Detroit franchise, as it has been for many years in the MLQ scene. Of course, you don't want to pull too many players away from these teams. There's also some of these players that play for Chaos that played for Detroit over the summer. So some of those, you'll see Chaos is listed on here for a couple of teams. Some franchises might share from their club teams that they're pulling from. So one thing that I'm sure you're already thinking about is, how is this going to work if the entire Heat roster goes to Soldados? Well, who's going to play for Heat? And that's a fair question. So I want the MLQ franchise to be a 21-player roster, the same as USQ teams. You get 21 players on your roster. We're not doing 30. And I have a contingency plan for injury and backups and other things. So that will be made of at least 11 permanent players on your roster. So take San Antonio for an example. There are at least 11 players that your team is the San Antonio Soldados. So pick whoever you want, Hayden Boys, David Avila, whoever, right? But there's going to be 11 at least. There can be more, but it's got to be at least 11. And then you have a maximum of 10, what I'm calling two-way players. And the two-way players, you can play for a college team and your professional counterpart, or your club team and your professional counterpart. So for example, David Avila, if this was going to happen this season, he could be a full-time player, one of the 11 full-time players. He's certainly good enough to be a full-time player. But if San Antonio also wanted to use one of their two-way slots on David, they could. And he could play at college, he could play for Texas State, and he could play for the San Antonio Soldados. You could also have someone in the club scene do this too. Maybe Jay Stewart, for example. Jay is also good enough to be one of the 11 probably full-time players or more. But Jay could play for Heat and could play for Soldados on a two-way deal, right? Now you only get 10 of these. And the way that this is going to work, the two-way deals, two-way players must appear in at least half of their college or club team games. Because I know what people are thinking. If you start pulling players away from club and college teams, you're going to hinder that. Team a lot, and that might still happen. But for this concept, players have to play in at least 51% of their games. This number could be increased, maybe closer to 60%, even higher than that. But at least half seems like a good starting point, because I also think that two-way players can only appear in a maximum of 75% of their pro team's games. And this is the reason why I'm doing it this way. I want the two-way deal to be primarily for college players looking for more experience. I want it to be something where really good college players have another team that they can play for in maybe a little bit of a better system, more consistent gameplay, more higher caliber opponents. And they're able to play those games and get that experience and really develop, like a lot of players do over MLQ during the summers already. But it doesn't become their main focus. Their main focus should still be their college or club team, which is why there's a 75% cap. This is why someone like David Avila or Jay Stewart probably would not be a two-way player, because you don't want to sit David on the bench for 25% of your games. At least I wouldn't if I was running the team. And one other thing to mention, in the event of injury, a pro team can give out an extra 4 two-way deals. And maybe I shouldn't cap this because injuries can get weird sometimes. The injury bug is a real thing, but I don't want it to get out of control where we're just taking an entire college roster. So I thought 4 was a happy medium. That gets you to 25, which is currently what teams take to MLQ champs is 25. So I thought this was fair. You get to add 4 more players on the two-way deals to your roster in the event of injury. For the schedule, the current MLQ schedule is you play 4 3-game series in about a 2.5 to 3 month span in MLQ champs. We'll get to that. If we move to a September to April pattern, well, September to November, that's 3 months right there. January to March is 3 months. So we've got roughly 6 months to play with. And you could even throw in maybe the start of December in there. So our new MLQ schedule, if moving to the USQ system, I'm going to have 8 3-game series. You'll play 4 of them September to November and 4 of them January to March. And I put you could even do 10. You could increase this because we had 11 teams that we're bringing over into this new model. You could play all 10. I think you could do 5 in the first half and 5 in the second half, and I think it would work. Travel might start to be a concern if you're playing 5 away series. So I left it at 8 because it's a little bit easier to manage, and it's more in line with the current MLQ schedule. This would go for 4 home series and 4 away series. So you're only traveling 4 times. The top 8, there'd be no divisions in this, by the way. So the top 8 from the 11 would qualify for MLQ champs, which I'm combining with nationals. Yes, this sounds like a logistical nightmare. We'll talk about that later. But it'll all be in one weekend. This is because if you're a two-way player, I don't want two-way players to have to go to nationals and then also go to MLQ champs. Which now that I think about it, that's kind of what they do anyway. You go to nationals in April and then MLQ champs in August. So maybe it could be a separate event. So back to our map, these 11 teams, I want to take a look at a quick example of what the standings could look like. This was done completely at random, with no bias at all as to who was the top team. But my Houston Legends, my hometown team, in this completely random simulation would be the 1 seed. Charlotte, San Antonio, Minneapolis, Chicago, Kansas City, Detroit, and New York would all make the playoffs. The bottom 3 would not make the playoffs. So then you'd have a standard 8-team bracket, but the one thing that I'd want to change from the current MLQ structure, there'd be no play-ins, but instead, if you're a top 4 team, you get to pick your first round opponent. I like how currently, if you're the 3rd best champion in MLQ, because the 1 seed and the 2 seed, they get to play the play-in winners. If you're that 3rd team, you get to choose your first round opponent between some of the 2nd place teams in MLQ. So like the Chicago Prowl selected to play the Kansas City Stampede in their first round of the playoffs this year. I want to expand that. If you're the top seed, if you're the Houston Legends, you get to pick from the 4 remaining teams which one you want to play. Maybe you say, well, Chicago's got a lot of talent. New York, in this simulation, had a down year, but they've still got a lot of talent. Maybe they want to pick someone else. Maybe they go for Detroit Innovators, right? They can try and pick someone that they match up better with. And then the 2 seed Charlotte, they pick from whoever's left. Say they pick Kansas City. San Antonio, they say, well, we just beat New York last year. We can do it again. Let's do it. And then Minneapolis is left with Chicago. And then you play this out, and obviously Houston would go on to win the final. But this is just an example of what things could look like. Teams would end up playing 24 games in my model, because you have 8 3-game series. So 8 times 3, 24 games. This is why the records look like this. One thing, I'm going to go back a slide here. If you're playing 4 home series and 4 away series, let's take Houston, for example. One thing that might come up is travel, and it would be harder for these South teams. At best, Houston gets 4 games at home. Maybe they go to San Antonio and to Kansas City, which are currently South Division opponents, but then you've still got to make 2 trips to either the North or the East. What if they have to go and play Detroit and go and play Charlotte? And yeah, that's a lot of travel, but some USQ teams do that anyway, and teams already go to 2 away series as is. Granted, they're not cross-country trips, but I still think it'd be doable across a 7th-month season. I think it'd be possible. And take someone like Cleveland, for example. Maybe you go play New York and go play Detroit and go play Kansas City, and you go down to Texas and play Houston. That's a lot more manageable, right? So even if, say these 2 Texas teams weren't here, these 9 teams up here, travel, I think, would actually be very manageable. 4 away series is still not ideal in terms of cost and travel time. But when you're compacted into the North and the East like this, it becomes easier. And I don't think it'd be impossible for the Texas teams either. Before we move forward, I don't ask for this very often, but please like and subscribe if you have not already. I love making these videos. It's the year 2026, so let's see if we can get 26 new subscribers by the end of January. I know we can do it. Thanks for watching. So moving on, let's talk about the negatives of this system, because there are some things, some comments I'm sure I'm going to hear. What happens to Summer League now? We're moving MLQ to the USQ season. Where's the Summer League going to be? That's fair. This could hinder current club teams. If you're pulling at least 11 players up into a new top tier, that might hurt some current club teams. That's a fair comment. There'd be lots of travel. As I just mentioned in that last slide, travel could get hard for especially San Antonio and Houston, even Kansas City. If you're making 4 cross-country trips and MLQ champs, that could get difficult. Nationals, as I said earlier, would be a logistical nightmare if it's all in one weekend. And I do think you could actually make it into 2 separate weekends. Maybe Nationals is in early to mid-April and MLQ champs is late April, early May, something like that. That might make it easier. Of course, if it's all in one weekend, I do like to think that it'll still be the same number of teams competing at Nationals, so maybe it'd be easier. And then the last thing, this could weaken college programs, and this is the biggest talking point, because this is where all the players come from. This is where the sport starts, is at the college level, and we can't weaken that. We want to make sure that this is as strong as possible. So I don't want this system to hurt the college scene. My whole idea with this, with the 2-way deals, is that college programs and college players could get stronger, could develop better. And I still think that can happen. So let me address all of these complaints. Nothing is stopping someone from starting another summer league. If MLQ moves over, nothing is going to stop players from wanting to play during the summer. I could start a summer league if I wanted to. And players would play. People would sign up. That's not going to stop people. Or fantasy tournaments come during the summer. People love fantasy tournaments. Slamta at Sam Houston just happened this past weekend. I couldn't go, unfortunately, this year. And and because I'm retired. But fantasy tournaments could happen during the summer, things like that. So nothing is stopping another summer league popping up. This could hinder the current club teams. Many club teams, in my assessment, are already divided into some competitive and non-competitive club teams already. That's not, I'm not trying to throw shade on any club teams, but the current structure of nationals at club is that 12 to 16 teams make what they call the competitive division, and then another 10 or so make the open division or the non-competitive. There's your split right there. You take the top 10 or so teams from the competitive tier, that makes your new MLQ, and the rest of them is your club scene. And yes, there's less club teams overall, I get that, but I still think it's gonna work out. Teams are still gonna be able to play each other. The rest of those teams aren't going away. There's still two-way deals. And I don't think, maybe some club teams aren't able to field rosters anymore. I do think that's a valid concern. But the MLQ teams are still going to be there, and that's something that teams can scrim against. I don't think that's an impossibility to overcome. Lots of travel. Currently, teams overall, if you're a player that plays USQ and MLQ, you already play 2 away MLQ series. Now, granted, I will hear the argument that they're in closer travel spots. Say the North Division, if you're someone like Chicago, and you only have to go to Minneapolis and to Detroit. That's not that far for Chicago. For someone like Houston, you've got to go to San Antonio. That's a 3-hour drive. Up to Kansas City, more like a 8 to 10 hour drive. So there's 2 right there. And when Austin and New Orleans were still here, Austin's a 3-hour drive from Houston. New Orleans is a 6-hour drive from Houston. So 2 MLQ series already. And then I think a majority of players play 2 USQ events. Take someone like Boom Train, for example. Trick or Beat was in Chicago, but Trainwreck traveled to the USQ Winter Classic. Boom Train will probably play another away tournament at some point. I wouldn't put it past them. Nationals would be a logistics nightmare. This is a concern that I don't have an answer to right now. I do think the number of teams would be similar to how it is already. I don't think we're going to change the number of teams. So if we have a similar number of fields available, similar number of referees, I actually don't think this would be as bad. I could make a part 2 to this and sit down and maybe play with all of it. There is also the other option of just having them on 2 separate weekends, which I think could work. And the final negative that I can see is that this could weaken college programs. This is the biggest thing that I want to avoid. That being said, I think my system gives a lot of opportunities to younger players to get more experience. If I heard at Baylor that I could play for, I guess Austin would have been my closest team at the time. I was never good enough to warrant probably getting a 2-way contract, especially with how good Austin was. But let's say I was. If I knew that I could get a 2-way contract with Austin and I wouldn't have to give up playing for Baylor, that would be very intriguing to me. I could still play for my college team, still play for Baylor, play with my teammates, and I could get the experience from learning from higher caliber players, learning from more experienced players. I think Sam Houston, Copperheads, and the Legends would benefit from this a lot. It's a pretty linear pipeline that Sam Houston goes to Copperheads, and a lot of Copperheads players now play for the Legends. I think if you're a Sam Houston player in that system, and you hear that you can sign a two-way deal with the Legends, I think a lot of players would jump for that. And I think the Legends group would be open to that, giving younger players a chance. This easily opens the door for expansion. I think this is easy to do. You need a city or a region with 2+ college teams or a college and a club team. It should probably be more than this, maybe more like 3 college teams and 2 club teams, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you have these 2 things, if you have a decent enough infrastructure and the teams are stable, I think you can warrant getting a team. Take something like the Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Madison area. You could pull from Illini and Columbia and from Minnesota. Marquette even is in Wisconsin. You could pull from those college teams, and then Brew Cities is right there in Wisconsin. TCQC is close by. They'd be more of a feeder for Minneapolis. Chaos is in the Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Wisconsin area. This is a team that you could go to MLQ and say, hey, we think we have a good enough infrastructure, a good enough pipeline that we could be an MLQ franchise. And I think it'd be easier to get teams up to the MLQ level. This also allows for the West to come back without having to have a full division. Because these teams operate a lot like USQ franchises, Bay Area and Lost Boys, they could step into the top tier at least. And it'd be pretty easy to do so because they competed at the USQ Winter Classic. There's one away tournament right there. They'll probably make another one, or nationals. But you don't have to have 4 or 5 cities out there that are ready to support teams. You can have just 1 or 2. Yes, travel would be harder, but it's doable. And I think that's the point here. This also gives players incentives to start and maintain new teams. If you hear that you can go start a team somewhere and your team can be in the top tier of competition, I think more players would be open to that, saying, I can go start a team in a city that already has a college team or a club team, and I can say, okay, let's take a couple of these players. Hey, do you want some more experience playing? College player. Let's take a couple of you and let's go make this new team and let's go compete in the highest level of competition. So if you wanted to add some of those cities, I think you could bring back Austin if UT came back and grew a bit more, and Baylor grew back and grew a bit more. A Bay Area team, a Lost Boys team, I think could come back. Something like Connecticut or Vermont could easily come back as well. Or not come back. I think they could join the league as well. And then you're back to 15 teams right there. And I think this just opens the door for teams to easily work their way into MLQ. There's also the idea of doing a complete reset, even more so than what I've done here. I've taken off 4 franchises. You could even do more. You could say, we only want to focus on the spots where quad ball is thriving. So let's go with cities or regions that have 3 college teams and 2 club teams. Or you've got 4 colleges, you've got a lot of colleges, and maybe 1 club team. And let's add another tier on top of it. Let's add a feeder system. And let's focus on the cities where this is working. Cities where we've got a lot of players that want to play high quality quad ball throughout the year. And we can grow in the other cities over time, but let's focus where quad ball is already thriving. This allows the biggest markets to have something higher to reach for without pulling resources from the medium-sized markets. You don't have to, someone like Houston, you don't have to sacrifice Copperheads in this model to add a Legends team. But someone like Boston, there's 10 teams that compete in MQC right now. Pick any of them. You've got the Lobsters, Dice are there. Dice might be more of a feeder for New York. Vermont even could be in that area. Boston Pandas or Red Pandas are also in that area. You've got plenty of teams to pull from, plenty of teams that would want to play for Forge. You may end up combining some teams. San Antonio and Houston could combine, let's say it's just San Antonio. Sam Houston, UTSA, UT, and Texas State would all feed into Copperheads and Heat. And Copperheads and Heat would feed into the San Antonio Soldados. And this is a much clearer model. You've got a lot of teams at the college level that feed to the club level, that then feed to a main professional top tier team in quad ball. I think there are 7 cities, 7 teams that are able to do this, in my opinion. San Antonio, as I mentioned, you've got 4 Texas programs, college programs. You've got 2 club teams, and that could feed into 1 San Antonio team. Kansas City, I think, could work. Mizzou, Creighton are both feeding here. Rain has a lot of Midwest-based players. You can even pull from some more Midwest, Chicago, Wisconsin type area teams like Chaos, like Illini, like Columbia, and a lot of those teams are also going to feed into Chicago. But also feeding into Chicago, you've got places like Minnesota and Marquette and Chaos and Chicago United, Boom Train, Trainwreck. There's a lot of club teams in here as well. Brew Cities is in this area too. Cleveland, I think, could combine with Detroit, and you could have 1 team for Indiana, Michigan, and Cleveland, or Ohio. So teams like Purdue, Ball State, Michigan, Michigan State, Crucio, Ohio Apollos as your club team, Pittsburgh even, could all combine into Cleveland. If you're all pulling your resources all together, I think that can make for a much stronger program. Bowling Green, I can't remember if I mentioned them, but them too. Boston and New York are pulling from basically the entire MQC. Brandeis, Boston University, Harvard, RPI, Rutgers, Vermont, all those teams up here. And then as well as the club teams, you've got Dice, you've got Slice, Vermont, Lobsters, Pandas, River Runners. You've got a ton of talent up here that can easily support 2 teams. And then Washington, I think, could be combined with Charlotte for this kind of mid-Atlantic region. You would have UVA, Virginia, which is going to give you a lot of talent into Washington. James Madison is providing some talent. Triangle United, which is 3 Carolina teams all together, that all can feed into either Carolina Reapers or DCQC, even Washington Monuments, and all that can feed into the Washington Admirals. And I think this is a much better system in saying we're going to go where we're stable. We're stable in a lot of these markets right now. Let's play there. These 7 teams, maybe they all play each other once throughout the season. So you play 6 series over the course of the year, MLQ champs, and go from there. And I just think this would be a really cool system to see. I really love this idea of having MLQ and USQ operate on the same timeline, because I just think it elevates the competition. Having MLQ and USQ be on separate seasons is fun and it's cool, and it allows for players to get more championship opportunities. But MLQ feels like it should be the professional scene. It should go throughout the whole year, in my opinion. And I think this is a cool concept to do that with. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe like I said earlier. I love making these videos, and I'll have my weekly updates coming back next week. Until next time, this is Jackson Vaughn signing off.